Are we ready? Everybody come to the. Everybody got it? Welcome. Man, it is so fun to see this room so full of people. I swung the camera around briefly right before we got quiet. And the other great thing is not just to see a room full of people, but a room full of people that seem really happy to see each other. You know, and they're talking and don't even want to stop talking. That's just a beautiful thing. So thank you. Welcome to Think Again, Faith Again tonight. It's gonna be great. And I'm gonna start out by going through a few things. I apologize for reading them. Some people are really good at just talking, right off the cuff. I'm not one of them. So I want to get my words all mixed up and forget some. I meant to turn the time over to Jim and Judy McConkey, whose lovely home this is, to start this out. Did you want to say, where are they? Jim and Judy. There you are. Did you want to say anything?
Well, you should know that you're in the DMZ. In this room. When we were going to build a house, our daughter-in-law said, "Would you like to build one with us?" And so, on the north side is their house, as you know, and their 4 daughters. And then on this side is our house with James and I. And then his mother lived in the apartment downstairs, so it's an intergenerational.
Well, and don't forget, property wise, who else is next to you?
Well, and then just down the driveway, the gray house is being remodeled. My daughter and her husband and 4 children. So the neighborhood groups, that's along that.
That's right. That's right. It's so cool. Seamus, thank you for your prelude music. Seamus Ubered here. Seamus, I always forget, as he was struggling to find which infants to come in. He is legally blind, and I never remember that because he acts so unblind. Seamus is a great guy, so thank you, Seamus. Some of you might remember that he used to open up for Thomas McConkey's Lower Lights Gatherings. He was often playing for those. And Thomas McConkey and Glow moved back in town, so excited to have them back. Yeah, I know, I missed them. Let's see. I want to thank the Faith Matters for providing the Zoom connection, and Jane womaning that connection, not manning, but womaning. Thank you. And we have Aubrey.
It's Jane to say that. By someone.
Yeah, my faithful wife. Aubrey and Tim Chavez are here of Faith Matters podcast and lead team members, so thank you. Well, I guess Tim is.
It's only coming, but Maya.
Maya. Thank you, Maya, for accompanying your mom. And let's see, I thought Signature Books was going to be here. Bob, no, maybe not. Anyway, Signature Books published this book, which Bob will touch on, about Eugene England's life, and a number of the family members have essays in there. Anyway, you can get that book at Signature Books. And finally, a big thanks to Bob Reese and Gloria, his faithful sidekick, keeps him moving in the right direction. And Charlotte and Mark. Is Jody here also or not? She doesn't come in. And any of the England folk, England folk that come in, the kids, there we go. We appreciate you being here. Yeah. Is Becky here? Yeah, she just came.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. So a little over 12 years ago, the first Faith Again was born in the home of Mark and Elizabeth England in Sugar House. They had been hosting a group called Think Again, which I'd been asked to lead. And as I noticed many of my family and friends leaving the church, this is 2013 and before, I suggested that we discuss Mormon history and faith crisis. And I asked, interestingly enough, James McConkie, whose home we're in, Judas, to come and talk about that. So normally we'd have anywhere, there's Jody, 10 to maybe 20 people come to this thing again. Once a month gathering, and that night we had Mark, what, maybe 70, 80? I mean, that, you know, the poor guy was packed. That house was so packed. It was remarkable. And so afterwards, we were just talking and they suggested maybe we should have a group just for that, Faith Again. For people kind of exploring the faith. Again, Think Again was just maybe a secular thing until I kind of interjected that crazy topic. James did, by the way, James McConkie did an amazing job that night. It was really, really a wonderful discussion. So Faith Again was born out of Think Again that night, about a little over 13 years ago. The amazing thing, for several years, Mark and Elizabeth hosted not just that group, but Think Again and Faith Again. So twice a month they opened their home. Sometimes they weren't even home. They were off doing something else and they would let us use their home. And they also, for Faith Again, would have, would fix this just sumptuous meal beforehand for the presenter. And Jean and I, and sometimes they'd invite others. And it was just kind of magical. It was a magical time.
Jay, you gotta be loud all the way through.
Oh, sorry.
You drop your voice sometimes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just call me on that. So I'll try to work on it. Anyway, so also they provided their, best of stage dolce gelato after every gathering that we had, and that probably brought as much people as the event. So that was just really cool. Since Mark would start the Faith Again gatherings in his own unique way, I've asked him to do that tonight. And then also share some remembrances of his father, Gene, that he might want to share. Before we do that, we're going to have a musical number by Kelly and Vivian Stewart. Those are the people that live in the front house on the compound. Daughter and granddaughter of Jim. And then opening prayer. Giles, you want to opening prayer? After that, after the musical number? Thank you. I call on you because you weren't paying attention, so.
Sorry to wake you.
I was looking at his beautiful granddaughter.
Wow, big way. So, yeah, they might, I think she's gonna sit here with her cello. And I apologize to our Zoom audience, music just does not translate well, but I promise you it's gorgeous.
Okay, we'll be playing an arrangement of Consider the Lilies.
Good job. I guess it's a rule. All right, here, I'll turn it towards you. Charles, I can do this. That'll be better. And then, as you know, this is a space you can actually pray to heavenly parents, so it's up to you. Just
I can actually what?
pray to heavenly parents if you feel so inclined.
That's who I usually pray to. Elated and on the wings of that beautiful music. Dear God, our parents in heaven, we are grateful for that uplift and the beauty and comfort of this home in which we can already feel thy spirit. In the midst of a world that is so deeply troubled, we feel especially blessed to be here and enjoy each other's company and to enjoy an opportunity to pay tribute to a dear friend, a mentor, one of thy sons whose heart was touched with fire and who left us with much to think about and some wonderful perspectives. Thou bless those who share tonight their remembrances of their father, their husband, their friend, and may we feel deeper the gratitude we have for the gospel in our lives as it enriches us and gives us the opportunity to be servants who help this deeply troubled world. Grateful for all these things and ask thy spirit to attend us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Giles. You what? Do your thing. What am I doing? You're on. You can stand. I mean, however you want to sit here if you want. Okay.
Traditionally, we would introduce the speaker or the subject, and the subject is my father, so we would always address favorite color, book, and movie. My dad is colorblind, so his favorite color was gray. Well, whatever color of tie he arbitrarily picked out of the closet. His favorite movie was The Hot Rock, but he lived It's a Wonderful Life. His favorite book was, I'm guessing, was Moby Dick. His favorite play was King Lear. We're gonna speak briefly. I'll say something, and then my mom will say something. We're gonna turn it over to everyone else to share their own thoughts. We'd rather hear from you.
Mark, did you want to do the 3 rules?
Oh,
Before you got started?
okay. 3 rules.
Terry?
Thanks for reminding me. The 3 rules of faith again are: this is not a dumping ground for all of your anger, justifiable anger at your experience in the church. But this is a safe space to express yourself and what your personal journey, whatever that journey is. And this is a safe place to share that, and we will all receive it and support you on that journey, wherever that is. And the 3rd rule is have fun. Thanks for reminding me. As I was reading this collection of essays, I'll say, everything I wanted to say is in my essay, but I did want to just read what other people, what I kept hearing from other people's essay, the common thread. And fortunately, I had a practice run of this on Sunstone, so hopefully we'll get through this better. These are just simple quotes from many of the essays. He created a space where they could feel at home. Jean was forever interpreting and acting toward others as though they had good intentions. I was a little adrift, and he mentored me. I couldn't turn down an invitation from someone who made me feel so welcome. He wrote hope for me. I went to work for a kindred spirit, an angel round about me. We found an intellectual and moral home with him. I felt seen. In another case, we were invited to his home. We were nobodies. In his presence, I felt my inadequacies diminished and my qualities enhanced. He made space for believers to question and space to know Christ. It felt like someone quietly slipping a lifeline into my grasping spiritual hands. And finally, Stephen Carter. He was struggling with writing an essay and wasn't sure what to do. And he encountered some real challenges. And then he said, but I was trying to do what Jean did, so I headed into the wilderness. Mom spoke the other day about when Dad proposed and they went through a gate at Temple Square that she didn't feel like they should go between Carter's statement and Mom's. We all know Dad spent his whole life going through gates into this he shouldn't have gone through, or he was told not to go through, but he went through it anyway. Nothing stopped him. But the common thread I found is he created safe space for people to live in their gospel and their struggles and their feeling of drift and marginalized in the world. And that was one of his greatest gifts that he imparted to so many people.
Mine.
You're next, right there. Thank you, Mark.
Well, there are two places in here. First of all, I wasn't a writer when Jean died. We were in a writing group with very good writers. They taught it, they published. And when they wanted to know if I wanted to stay in a group, and I said, of course I do. So-and-so's doing a play, somebody's doing a novel, it was just exciting. And they said, fine, good. So I enjoyed myself there for a couple of months. And then they said, your turn's coming up. And I said, there's no way in the world that I'm going to write anything that you're going to read. Because I said, you will expect me to have somehow had this by osmosis come from Jean and become a writer. I'm not, I'm an artist, I'm a musician. And but anyway, they kept at me and I did it. That was 24 years ago. And they have helped me be a writer. I'm now going back and re-editing, rewriting so many of them because there's so much more that I want to put in there. So I'm grateful for those very patient, scholarly people who I wrote in a non-scholarly way, but I just appreciate it. So when they wanted me to write something for this, that was publishing. That was quite a new thing. And I read there's a little beginning that I have, and then I get the last story about Jean's illness and things. But instead of that, I think I'll tell you a story that I just told Mark that tells about Jean. And I was when he died, I was pretty lost, and my kids were seeing this too, and so time was going on, and a woman from the Elder Crest group called me and said, would you come and teach class? And I said, I can't even think, let alone put together any kind of a class, and this isn't what I can do. And she just kept insisting. Well, my children learned about it, and they said, you got to do it, Mom. You're going down the rabbit hole, and you've got to do it. And I just thought, they can't push me into this, can they? Well, they did. And so I said, what am I going to teach? And he said, well, what do you love? And I said, art or music. And then they said, okay. So I decided I would teach my favorite paintings all through history, and we just talk about them. So I put my portfolio together, about this big, with everything I could imagine, way over prepared. And I got to the senior center, parked the car, walked down the hall, and I saw a class like this, just sitting there waiting to learn. And I just thought, I can't do this. I just can't do this. And right then, I just felt like Jean pushed me over the threshold, said, you not only can do this, but I'm going to be there with you. So the experience turned into this incredible love to teach what's something I loved. And I did. I felt I had confidence to do things that I could never have done before, but I just thought, okay, how can I word this? And I just felt like Jean was helping me through that. So he all our life together, we have done some hard things. We made some hard choices, and we've somehow come out in a pretty good way. And so I think I wouldn't have been even what I'm doing now if I hadn't been challenged that much. And you know, we did some crazy things. And one thing that we started our marriage with was it being sent on a mission to Samoa. And we you know, we had to go look up the map on the map before Samoa was. We were immediately, when we got there by boat, went up to an island called Savai'i, and at the top of this hill was a village, and we taught children. We had to teach them English as well as living Samoan, because they needed to have access to literature that they didn't have in their country. So it was just, and from then on, it was just kind of open house for our family, for our friends, as it was in Samoa, and it was a wonderful thing. And I'm glad for every hard step we took. So read the book.
Are we supposed to turn over to? Oh no, you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Let me. There you go.
So nice to see all of you here this evening. After that incredible opening music, I turned to Clifton and said, why don't you say the closing prayer? It's I must say that working with Charlotte and with Brent Rushforth and with Des Thomas Griffith on this book, I have to give credit to them, but especially to her. If you get the book, the two most beautiful essays in it are those by Charlotte. The last one, called The Last Dance, is just an incredible and beautiful tribute to their life together. And I was trying to estimate the other day, you know, in the Old Testament, the great sin was not sexual sin or blasphemy, it was inhospitality. And Charlotte and Jean set an example that I don't know duplicated anywhere of I want to say tens of thousands of people who have enjoyed their wonderful, generous hospitality. So I want to make that clear. Also want to thank Barbara Jones Brown of Signature Books for publishing this beautiful volume. It was really a wonderful experience for me as an editor. We started out with what I think was somewhere around 30 essays, and then Charlotte kept thinking of other people, or some people kept thinking of other people, and so we ended up with 45 essays, tributes to Jean, that run the gamut of family, students, colleagues, people like Jay who'd never met him, but who wanted to say something about having met him. Emerson observed that every institution is the length and shadow of one person. I don't know that Gene was an institution, but he certainly had a very long shadow that continues to this day. In an essay I wrote once called Eugene England, Our Brother in Christ, I quoted Brigham Young. I talked about Brigham Young, who said that there never was a time when he did not know Joseph Smith. What Brigham meant, I believe, is that when he first met Joseph, there was such a deep and immediate kinship that somehow he felt a mysterious bond between them, as if he had known Joseph before. Whether that was unconscious thread or some pre-existent memory or simply deep magnetic attraction, we do not know. But it's clear that both men, there was a deep love between them, like that between David and Jonathan. How else can one explain that Brigham Young's dying words were not to his wife or wives? And you can imagine Brigham saying, as he said, Joseph, 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 and if he had said Madeline, Emily, someone said, Brigham, we don't have eternity. But that reaching out, I think, is that kinship is what Gene. So there are just many people who have that sense of deep kinship, friendship, love for him. In first issue Dialogue, Gene wrote his essay about dialogue. And he said, I am motivated in my relationship to Christ and my desire to build his kingdom by both the questing openness and the loving authority exhibited in his life and his revelations to his prophets. The central overarching motivation in Gene's life was to be a disciple of Christ. And I don't know of anyone who exemplified that in terms of the broad range, we think, of what discipleship means. Not only humility, but the courage and the sacrifice and all of those things that we associate with the Savior. Gene's imitation of Christ included his questing openness and openness to the possibilities of what a true Christian life would be. I'm going to hurry this out. And it's interesting that Nibley looked at the in the beginning was God. For Nibley, it was in the beginning was the dialogue, and the dialogue was with God, and the dialogue was God. And that word dialogue explains so much about Gene, who had a dialogue, I think, not only with people who had passed and people who had yet to come into this world, but anyone else who was willing to sit down and talk about anything that was of interest to them, because it was of interest to them. It was of interest to Gene. He says, my faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me into the relationship with all creation. And that word thrust says everything about Gene. We're going to take some time now, in the limited time we have, to give anyone who wants to say a few words about Gene or some remembrances or something that they would just like to say. And I don't know how mechanically you want.
Yeah, I can move this around, but I wanted to give first dibs to the kids of Gene. If they wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you guys are heard, or spouses. Who else?
Yes. Excuse me
Um,
for forgetting.
No, that's okay. So. You get past all these knees in front of you.
Well, I hadn't thought of saying anything, but I did review the book today. I read most through everything, and one that kind of stood out to me was Rosalind Welch's at the bat. The thing about that is pretty much everything that people wrote about the classroom, reading his essays and changing their lives. It did, I was in so many classes and read all of his works but the dad that I really loved was not in the classroom and not on the page. It was when we were having adventures. And especially like in London or in the mountains. He taught us all to fly fish. And I survived cancer, thanks partly to this good radiologist, this good man, my husband. And went through a lot of years of also severe depression after that, going through the cancer treatment. And I think what I learned from my dad was part of helping me survive and thrive. And that was his love of life and adventure, and his acceptance and encouragement and belief in the best of everyone. And I drew on that in my healing. I had so many experiences with my dad, I can't even count them, and it was easy to draw on what I learned from him around that. And so I would say my love of theater, my love of life, I really appreciate my dad for that. So.
Thank you. Jordan, did you want to say anything real quick? No, okay. Jody, you might have to come up with it.
Well,
And
I'm sure.
well, you do have a good voice, so I forgot about that. But you're so far away in the visual. It'd be great if you want to come up.
That's pretty good. I do have an essay in the book, and that's complicated enough, but it just occurred to me, an experience I had, because I agree with Becky. I remember when he was first in the hospital, and a lot of people were calling, and this one man called, he was involved in Mormon studies, and he said, you just tell your dad that we're all praying for him, because the world needs a man like this man, such as Eugene England. I said, screw the world, I mean, I need my dad. And a lot of the times, that's really how it was. It was this interesting thing to experience him as his impact on other people, and also experience him as my dad, and who also had such a deep impact on me. And I recall this time when there was a young man who was a student of Dad's, and it was asking me out, and I wasn't interested in going out with him. And I'd been friends and knew him, and knew I didn't want to date him. And my dad sat me down. He said, "Look, he kind of reminds me of B. He's kind of got a little bit of awkwardness, and he's really, into intellectual levels and kind of awkward. And your mom took me and just really shaped me and helped me learn how to connect with people and communicate and just be a part of things." And I said, "Yeah, but Dad, I'm not Mom. I could never marry you." And I was like, this look, that look on his face, like, oh. I said, "I'm also too much like you. I could never do what Mom does." And I thought of that, every once in a while, and so thank goddess I didn't, because of this.
Here he is.
Who I think he is more like my mom than I am, because he really loves me so much, and embraces the complexity of being the kind of person that I learned to be. A great deal from both my mom and my dad. But I appreciate this book. I appreciate the opportunity to be reminded again of how Dad was a person who made a difference. And if there's anything I learned from him, is that we each are our own person to make our difference in our own way. And in those, after he was in the hospital, and I'll still remember this forever. This couple from the board had come to talk to him. He was going to tell them what to do to kind of take over teaching this elder quest until mom started teaching it. And they were talking to him about it, and they were also saying, just don't worry about a thing. Dad said, I think the important thing is to convey that it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter if you've written anything, or if you have a title, or if a lot of people know you. The most important thing we can do in this life is take your grandchild fishing, sit and listen to each other. Just love someone. And Dad was someone who did that, along with everything else. And that's what made the biggest difference to me.
Thank you. Mike, did you have?
Apparently awkwardly.
That's lovely. So now we can open it up to the rest of you if you want. So someone moving back here.
I'm moving, but that's. You're a scary person.
Yes, Stan.
I'll go. It's a little bit like a testimony meeting that you sort of want to jump into, but don't want to jump into. Certainly those that have spoken are going to be the big stars. I was one of the lucky students. And Gene just had a huge impact on so many kids at BYU. And one of the things, and Charlotte and I have had this conversation, that I didn't love about the recent biographies is they didn't focus enough on that. That he really lifted lots of us up. And I had opportunities to be at their cabin and go on hikes with them and learn from him. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned about Gene is he was a great talker, but he was also really inquisitive. He would ask, my opinion on things. And later in life, I got to, so Bob and Gene, we could do a whole session on that relationship. They were sort of my big brothers and maybe uncles. We were all on the Sunstone board together for probably a decade. And it was a difficult time in Sunstone's history, sort of late 80s through the late 90s. And, the church wasn't pleased with everything Sunstone was doing. And we were all trying to navigate that together. I was talking to my son before coming here, sorry, my 25-year-old, who isn't that familiar with Gene. And I was talking to him about some of those hard times. And I said, he was so true to the gospel and an apologist and a savior of individuals. And I said, he was so good at that and so impactful that he was persecuted for it. And you have to be pretty special to be persecuted. I'll just give one other memory. So I was giving a presentation at Sunstone early on, and there was a lot of controversy at the time. Some of you were there in those days. There were people, I was in my 30s, over 30 years ago, and feeling way out of my element, with people like Bob and Gene on the board. And I was giving a presentation where I was trying to balance some of the needs of the church for a respectful tone and not persecuting the leaders and academic freedom and openness. And it was a tricky presentation. And I got done and I came down and Gene, he stood up and he kind of almost ran to me and he just gave me the biggest hug. And I just thought, wow, I want to be able to hug people like that and have that kind of impact on people. And he's a truly great man. Those of us that knew him were lucky. And I'm envious of the family members because you had so much time with Gene. But I'd just like to say to the family and friends how grateful I am that I got to feel some of that love. And I jumped in quick because Bob had been bothering me to write something. And I just felt too intimidated and I missed the deadline. I thought, I've got to say something tonight.
Stan, you feel like where you've landed as someone who specializes in negotiation, and you do this amazing podcast, All Things Negotiation, that gets like top level people throughout the world on there. And each episode that I've listened to has that kind of same, regardless of the specific topic, whether it's blockchain or whatever it is, there's still a warmth somehow in there about relationships and how much they matter. Do you think where you are now is kind of influenced by?
Yeah, the word that just keeps coming to mind is warmth. He was a warm person. He just, whether it was that hug or, he would call me and ask me questions about things that I felt like he knew so much more than I did about. And it was, the purpose of the call probably wasn't to get information, it was probably make me feel good. And so, yeah, I just feel like I'm a better person for having known him. But hopefully some of that rubbed off. That's my mother.
Something.
Yes.
My father is a physician. He's not, was a physician. He's not particularly intellectual, but very smart. And in about 1966, he started taking dialogue. And I saw it around the house. I wasn't sure what to make of it. And I read a couple of the articles and I was impressed. When I got to the MTC, which in those days was the LPM, I was in Amanda Night Hall, and I don't sleep very much. And so I asked my father to send me some reading material. So he sent me dialogue. So lights out, 10:30, I headed up to the attic and I started reading dialogue in earnest and became a fan of Eugene England. Fast forward, 10 years later, it's 1978, and I am working on the then literary magazine at BYU called Century 2, which probably nobody here remembers. And Eugene had just come from, had you come from Minnesota?
Yeah.
At that point, just come from Minnesota, and he was our advisor. And I had all sorts of ideas on what we should do, and mostly they were bombastic, and they were rebellious. And he just looked at me and said, "I'm a poor little boy. That is not the way to get things done." And because of that advice, it took a different road altogether, and I think the magazine was much more successful because of it. Graduation time came near, and I wanted to graduate as a university scholar in the honors program. The only way to do that was to have a thesis. And I was panicking because I had not prepared, I did not have a thesis. And so I went to Gene and to his house, and I said, "Well, what shall I do?" And he said, "Well, what interests you?" And I said, "Well, my life isn't that interesting. I'm here at BYU after all." And he said, "Look, have you done anything exciting or adventurous?" And I said, "Well, my dad and I did a medical mission down in the Amazon River. And we stopped in a place called Yarinacocha. And we spent a week before we set out on our medical mission down the Amazon River, the length of it, with the Wycliffe Bible translators. And what they would do is they would go out into the bush. They would write down the language of these people. Languages had not been written down. And then they would write, then they would give them the Bible in that language. And these were the most dedicated people you can imagine. And I was really touched by the spirit. I thought, well, how can we be right and these people be wrong? And I ran this idea by Eugene, and he said, "Write about that. Write about how you feel. Write about what you learned." And I did. And I think the paper was much better with his input than had been without his input. Then about 20 years after that, we kept in touch because they'd have concerts, and my wife's a musician, and the Englands were gracious enough to have her play there. But Bob and come from the Sunstone Symposium, probably about 1997 or 1998. And they asked me, "Why aren't you a Sunstone? There seems to be a grain of Sunstone." I said, "Come on, I've got 4 kids I'm trying to raise. My wife is in the midst of a chaotic musical career. I'm trying to establish a practice. We just don't have time." And I think that kind of hurt Gene's feelings, and I think maybe yours too, Bobby. But and that we know Bob from UCLA. And then we started talking about gay rights. And at that time, I'm embarrassed to say that I actually thought that homosexuality was a sin. And he said that one day gays would be able to be married. Now, mind you, this was 16, 17 years before Obergefell. And I remember pushing back. But after that visit, I thought about it. And then when it turned out that one of my kids was gay, I remember the compassion with which he approached that topic. And one last thing I want to say about him is I never felt rushed. Whenever I would go to the house to talk about the University Scholar Project, I felt that I was the most important thing in his life. And there were girls running around the house, and there were boys chasing the girls, all sorts of things going on in the England home. All sorts of things. But he focused on me as he focused on just about every student. So I really owe a lot to Eugene and to Bob It was really fun to see them together. That was a great visit, by the way, and it was a sentinel visit in my life. Because I think it changed my heart and changed my mind and prepared me to accept a child that I may have had more difficulty accepting. So God bless Gene's memory and his wonderful family. I've gotten to know all the daughters very well and their spouses, and they are an incredible group of people.
Clifton, Bob says you want to say something?
I always want to.
That's true. That was a.
Think better of.
Can you, yeah, can you get a little closer? Thank
I'll
you.
stand. I'm ready to go.
Sit right.
You sure? Yeah, a little closer though. Maybe do come in that. Thank you, Carrie, by that chair. You can stand, but just come closer.
Me?
Yeah, you. Of course you.
How's that? Good.
That's better.
I met Eugene because I called Charlotte in, when he was teaching back at, help me, Charlotte. Back somewhere. And I just read dialogue for the first time. I was teaching seminary and it just kind of opened everything up for me. I mean, a single book, it was like, it was like reading Job the first time, but very different in the outcome. And so I called Charlotte and I asked if Jean was there, and she was tentative. Years later, I realized that she maybe got a lot of calls asking if Jean was there that were not good calls. And so I tried to explain to her that my life had been changed, as it has ever since. And then I sought out Jean after that forever. Every chance I had to, when he built his house, I hauled bricks for his house. When he needed, when he went fishing, I invited myself to go fishing with him. And it occurred to me that this attentiveness that he talked about, because he always seemed to be listening to me. And I once asked him, well, you seem to be listening. Are you thinking I need to stop at Costco? You know, are other things going through your head? And he looked, he was shocked. And he said, I can't believe you asked me that. And I said, I can't believe I just asked you. Never mind. When I was on one of those trips up to the cabin, we were sitting in the back seat, not in the back seat. We got picked up by some farmers who had hay in the back of a pickup truck, and we were riding with this hay. I have no idea why. I don't know how it happened. But I remember that Jean was talking to them about hay, and that he was as interested in listening to them about hay as he had pretended to keep listening to me. And when it was, and it stunned me that that whatever was before him was of interest. And when it was over, I said, you know, I watched you listening to them like you listened to all of us. And it was about hay. He said, Clifton, you don't know anything about hay. Which is true enough. And so when Jean was in the hospital, I came from Texas, and the kids were outside waiting, and they just published this broadside, this wonderful paper publishing a lot of Jean's things, his essays. And the centerfold had blessing the Chevrolet on this side, and what I regarded as my companion piece called Selling the Chevrolet on the right side. Because on his way to England, he stopped by my house. I was studying for my doctoral exams. And he said, I need you to sell my car. And I said, I don't sell cars. I'm gonna sell my own cars. I give them away. I don't know how to sell a car. And besides that, I'm studying for my doctorate. And he looked at me very seriously and he said, Clifton, this is the Chevrolet. And I said, say no more. Or they'll sell this car or keep it. And so I wrote a story about selling the Chevrolet, and I thought it was a delightful little piece, entirely unlike his piece, which quite frankly is of all of his writing the most important to me. Because I grew up as a crippled kid. But I was made to walk after the doctor said I wouldn't from polio. Because a couple of because the custodian of our chapel was 70 and a friend of his was 70 gave me a blessing. And they promised me that I would walk again. And which was confusing because all the doctors said I would not walk again. And I said, great, I get one of those little wheelchairs, it's gonna be terrific, because my dad had me crawling around on the floor. He wouldn't let me use crutches, he wouldn't let me use, because he knew how lazy I was. He knew that if I found another option, I wouldn't walk. And besides that, he trusted in that blessing. And so at any rate, I did walk, and the idea that Gene seemed to be, that he got through to me was that the power of prayer, the power of hope, the power of priesthood, the power of love are all kind of one. They serve one another. And that power is more important than all of the other things that seem to be important, especially for a kid who couldn't walk and walked again. As you can see, I'm getting over it. It didn't last forever, but it's lasted. And we were talking about these two essays, and I told the kids, I said, he never liked my essay. And they said, really not? And they thought it was kind of funny now. I never thought of it as funny. I thought it is slightly alarming. But when he got back from England, he didn't say anything about it. And I asked him, I said, what about my essay? He said, I didn't like it. I had never heard Gene England say he didn't like anything. And he didn't like my essay. And I said, why not? And he said, well, it made light of a sacred event. And I said, yeah, that's kind of my thing, But the kids were great about it, and I thought I would go in and once again apologize to him. But instead he pulled me down close to him. And he said, Clifton, I've had the miracle. And just like my father believed in my miracle, I believed in Gene's, and I went home thinking he was going to live, which of course he didn't. And I have lived ever since thinking that when he said I had the miracle, I should have asked him, what does that mean? But because I was less attentive than Gene, I thought I knew. And so that's the first thing I'm going to ask him when I see him. What does the miracle mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Guess I should stay on top.
Yeah. Talk loud.
Okay,
Yeah.
I taught at BYU for a number of years, was asked to start a writing fellows program. So I took students out of their majors and taught them how to write in their majors, and then they would be assigned to professors and help them with their writing.
What is your name?
Deirdre Paulson. So I had worked with several professors and I started this thing. Actually, Eloise Bell asked me to start it, if any of you knew Eloise. And she sent me back to Brown University because they were the first ones that had a writing fellows program. And so I learned at Brown University how to start it, and then it spread. Utah State University started it, et cetera. So it was going really well, I thought. But some of the faculty were upset because young kids were telling their students how to write in their disciplines. And they were taking it as a personal affront. So I don't know how this all happened, but I wound up with Eugene as an advisor for the program. And he was great. he would talk at faculty meetings, how important it was to write in your discipline. You know, that some disciplines you could use this, others you could use this, etc. And he was just great. He did it for 2 years and he was so personal with my writing fellows. He would have us for dinner at your house. He would give lectures and invite the writing fellows to his lectures where he would refer to them, you know, build them up. The whole thing was building up the writing fellows. And he did that for 2 years before he left for a year and taught at Slick, and then he passed away soon after that. Anyway, I was just so grateful to him for all that he, you know, he did. He was just so wonderful to work with and was so positive with my students and built them in positive ways that I by myself couldn't do it, but with the two of us working together, we really built the program. So I'm always been grateful to it.
Anyone else want to share?
I'd like to share something.
Please
So
do.
I'm an odd sharer because I never met him. But my name's Ben Schlady. I've lived with Charlotte plus. I did the math when I lived with you for 7 years. And before I moved back to Provo, I was living in Tucson, and I wore my testimony one day in my ward, and I said there were a lot of things I believe and a couple things I know. And then after I said that, some guy in my ward I didn't know came up to me and said, "You seem like someone who thinks." And I said, "Hopefully." And he said, "I'm starting this little discussion group. Would you like to come?" And I said, "Great." So there were 4 of us in his house, and the first thing we read was the importance of dialogue, like from that first issue of Dialogue. And I had never heard of Eugene England before. And so we would get together every week and we would read a piece like these classic dialogue pieces, and it was great. Like it really blessed my faith. It gave me the opportunity to think in a more nuanced way, and as a gay person to kind of like see God as this and the church as this, and there was a Venn diagram where they overlapped a lot. And that was great. But it gave me a lot of space to grow my faith. And then when I moved to Provo and got the opportunity to live with Charlotte, I was like, how did I get to be so lucky to live with this famous woman? And pretty soon Charlotte just became Charlotte. Like she wasn't this famous person, just my friend. And it was really special to me. Like I got to write a book living in that house in Gene's old study. I see his old shoes every day on a shelf in the room I always hang out in. And his artifacts are all over. And I feel like even though I never got to know Gene, he has blessed my life in countless ways. And I just am so honored that I can be so blessed by someone who passed away long before I ever even heard him. So grateful for his continuing legacy and how it's blessed me.
Again, what's the name of your book?
It's called A Walk in My Shoes.
Walk in My Shoes.
And Charlotte makes a great cameo in it.
That's great. Thank you.
I could say something.
Yes.
So I was another fortunate student of Gene's. I took his LDS literature course, and 2 lectures in, I knew I wanted to take another course from him, which I did manage to do, the literature pilgrimage. I felt like I had never seen someone who was so actively, so thoughtfully trying to be a true disciple of Christ. And when he was diagnosed with his brain tumor, my parents had told me, "Oh, we saw Gene at the symphony, and he said you should visit when you come home." I got home, and the first thing I heard was, "Oh, Gene's had a tumor." When he passed away, I thought, this almost forces me to believe in the afterlife, because the thought of such goodness ceasing to exist is just unbearable.
So it's beautiful. Yes.
I'll be brief. I'm another one of Gene's students. I held one class from Gene, Intro to LDS Literature. This was 1986, so just a few years ago. My parents are both converts to the church, and I was just after my mission at BYU with the fire of testimony. I loved the church, but I realized I thought differently than a lot of people in the church. And my parents are converts. We had no sense of the intellectual tradition of the church. There was pretty thin sense of the doctrine of the church, just good old practice of Mormonism. And I had no examples to look to of how to think the way I wanted to think and still love this church. And Gene was that for me. And he showed me how to think critically, to challenge, to ask questions, to embrace dialogue that was spicy, but still have this deep faith, to still be connected to the Spirit. And he was an example I needed at that time. And it was simple. I only made it to your house on one Sunday evening, Charlotte, but it was impactful for me. It was, so I was not a long disciple of Gene's. I was a student for a short period of time in person, and then all the reading that I could read of Gene's. I heard his voice as I read from there, and his example stayed with me for the last 30 years, and I've been now shoving it to my children essay by essay. So, it's been good.
One of the really beautiful essays in the collection is from this dear man here who never knew Gene, but who wanted to make a pilgrimage. He and his wife were, really enchanted with pilgrimages. Before they ever went to Spain and did the big one, they made a pilgrimage to Togo and met Gene. Yeah. Jay, why don't you say just a word or two about that?
Yeah, I mean, many years ago, I was introduced to Gene through his essay by a friend of mine. And he actually took me by Gene's and Charlotte's home. He had never been inside, but he highly respected Gene enough to bring me down and do a pilgrimage to kind of just shadow your house and look at it. Kind of embarrassing to say. But I hadn't at that time had much familiarity. But he introduced me to that essay, "The Church is as True of the Gospel." And then, I bought some books, peace, and all these things. And so it was really helpful to have that kind of more liberal, open-hearted perspective that Gene offered. But what I wanted to focus on in my essay was this, and it's ironic we're sitting here in this McConkie home. If you know Eugene's history, you know that Bruce R. McConkie, he had this huge altercation. So as I mentioned, the first Faith Again that ended up being the Faith Again was Jim McConkie offering that, presenting it that evening. And sometime after, Jim had mentioned, his kind of heartbreak over that whole thing that his uncle did, how it really harmed the England family. I should let Jim, you should really take it from here, because this is, anyway, I just arranged for us, Jane and I, to go down with Charlotte. Charlotte was open to it. I'd met her a number of times before then, thanks to Mark. And she was willing to have Jim and Judy come down. And of course, she had to provide the dinner, as she always does. Her amazing chicken and ice cream and all the beautiful things, the rice and bread that she does. So, James, maybe you could take it from there, or Judy.
Could I say something just in introduction to that?
Well, while Jim comes up. Forward.
I distinctly remember Jim and Judy coming to my home many years ago at the first Faith Again. And they were so contrite, as if they had written that letter and taken full responsibility for it. And they just felt so bad about what Bruce had done, and they were just mortified to think that our family held some kind of resentment. And hopefully I put their mind at ease that no one in my family felt any ill feelings towards them. And, I can't say about Bruce, I just don't care. But well, give any energy towards that. But They were so kind in, worrying about our welfare and how it affected us. And hopefully I put their minds at ease about, and spoke for my family, that none of us felt any ill feelings towards them, but I appreciate their, effort to heal that wound.
Thank you, Mark. That's helpful to have.
And so from my perspective, I was a bishop in the seventh ward. And one afternoon, a group of people came to our home, and one of them was in England. And I remember feeling pain, because I sensed, because I was a McConkey and he was in England, that there was tension and anxiety. And I felt badly about it, because I had read many of the things that Eugene England had written. My sense of eternity and eternal progression were along his lines, and he fed me spiritually as he fed you. And so years went by, and I got to know Jay, and he said, "How would you like to speak in England home?" And I thought, "Are you kidding?" I may not get a whole lot. If you have the name McConkey, they put you in a box real quick. I've lived with this all my life, but I went over, and what Mark represented was true. He embraced me, and we were brothers, and that led to his coming here for dinner. And then the most beautiful thing happened. Jay said, "You're welcome to go down and meet Charlotte." And so Judy and I went down for a lovely dinner, and I had no idea what would happen, but I knew it was right. And we talked for an hour and a half. And I felt this sweet sense of forgiveness and a sense of acceptance. And our birthdays are the same day. And since then, we've been at her home and enjoyed her hospitality. She's come here, and there's a sense of healing and love, genuine love, Charlotte, for you and your family.
And lovely. I think most of us have the impression that there was some communication from that other world to this, and that sometimes people are looking down to observe us. And one of the things about Gene that a lot of people don't know is that before he was immediately initially not able to get a job at BYU, and he worked with Leonard Arrington in the historian's office, and doing so discovered one of the truly great gems of American or Mormon literature, story of Joseph Millet. And some of you may remember that story, that Joseph Millet and some early pioneers were in very poor times, and Joseph was an amazing young man who went on his mission without purse or script to Nova Scotia. Had to sell his Bible to get for the passage over there, and just this amazing story as he's teaching the gospel to this people in this fishing village. And when the fishermen were going out, he said foolishly, "I hope you catch a whale." And people in the community said, the Mormon missionaries are prophesying that the men are going to catch a whale. And he felt so terrible about this. He went into the woods and kneeled down and asked God to forgive him for saying something so foolish. And when the fishing boat came back, they were towing a whale. Joseph Millet had that kind of faith and goodness. And when he came back and went south, and things were very poor, his neighbor, Newton Hall, came to him and said, and hardly anybody had enough food. And Newton Hall came to him and said, "I've been around asking everybody for some food, some flour for my children. I couldn't find any. So I went into the cedars and prayed. And the Lord said, go to Joseph Miller. And Joseph Miller records this and said that when Brother Hall came, he said, Brother Hall, here's some flour and you don't have to return. Because if the Lord asks you for it, it's yours. And then he writes in his journal these words. You can't tell how good it made me to feel to know that the Lord knew there was such a person as Joseph Miller. I'm certain that when Jean lived among us, the Lord knew there was such a person as Eugene England, that he sent many to him who were in need of spiritual and material nourishment from Jean and Charlotte, and who, as we are supposed to do, stood in Christ's stead in ministering to his children. You don't know how good it makes me feel to know that the Lord knew Jean and knows him now, or how good it makes me feel to know that we will know him, or how good it makes me feel to know that we'll know him again in, as the Negro spiritual calls it, that great getting up morning, as it says in the Doctrine and Covenants, that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among us there, only it will be coupled with eternal glory. When I put together, before Jean became ill, I wanted to put together a collection of essays to honor him and have a big party and surprise him with it. It was called Proving Contraries. Some of you wrote things for that. And it's a beautiful tribute to Jean, just like this is. And I'm, in addition to collecting and editing, I wrote the last chapter, which is called Eugene England Enters Heaven. And it was based on a poem by Vachel Lindsay, American poet, who wrote a poem about the head of the Salvation Army, William Booth, going into heaven. And the line says, the Salvation Army band begins to play, or gives way to the choir. And when Booth halted by the curtain of prayer, he saw his master. Through the flag-filled air, Christ came gently with the robe and crown, where Booth the soldier, while the throng knelt down. He saw King Jesus. They were face to face, and he knelt a weeping in that holy place. That's the image I have of Jean entering heaven and us meeting him there. Thank you. A good book. You'll enjoy getting acquainted with a lot of people who knew Jean, and the variety of perspectives, just a joy to read.
I just want to say one short thing. Jean would be absolutely stunned to have this much attention drawn for the good things he's done. The thing that I love about it, each one of you have been touched in some way, and you've gone on to use that to do for somebody else. And it's in you, and it will always be in you. And so you enrich somebody else's life just like this. And hold on to it and enjoy it. And let others enjoy what you have. And don't be embarrassed by it or self-conscious. Just let it be what it is. And that's how simple the goodness is. It's just very small ways, simple ways. And it means you, all of you, I mean, just imagine how many people you affect just from here, and how fortunate they are. So keep it up.
Thank you. Mark, do you have anything else?
Imagine for many of you who never met Dad, you may listen to these people and go, what the smart are they talking about? And I know that's hard to believe, because I can't think of very many people, maybe one or two, that affected me, their presence affected me. I know lots of really smart people and famous people and well-accomplished people, but I only know one or two that I just felt that influence of goodness and brightness and joy exuding from them. And if this book and the things that people said today aren't witness that there's something different about Dad, I don't know what to tell you. We were really fortunate. Me and my sisters were just plain lucky to hang around him all the time and not appreciate who he was. I often compare him to what a black hole is like. You don't see it. It's not the center of attention. Dad was not this, he never made himself the center of attention. And all the things he was doing, he was just like enrolling everybody else. Okay, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna do this, and we're gonna just do this amazing thing, and I'm gonna inspire you. But he didn't make it about himself. But his gravitational pull was felt everywhere and unseen. And it spun everybody out in these strange orbits, their own orbits, that they went to, created their own thing. And that's what I think is the unappreciated part of him. He's just influencing everybody and inspiring them to do their own thing, to be the best that they could be. And Becky touched on that too. I've never met anyone as alive as Dad was. He was just passionate about anything.
Everything.
I can't think of anything he wasn't interested in. I remember we were in London once, and he just started speaking French on the phone. I'm like, where the hell did you learn how to speak French? And he was just going on these adventures, as Becky said, he was just always on adventures and just excited about everything. And that's influenced all of us, especially as I look at my sisters. We just love going places and talking about stuff. And it's all Dad, just all Dad. So
Beautiful, Mark. Thank you. Jody?
Jane's here.
Oh, Jane, where are you? Oh, you want to say something?
Busy grading my exams.
Oh, you're good. You want to come up in view here? Come in so we can see you.
Hey, Jane, come on.
Clifton's gonna kick you if you don't get in. You did it already.
Plus the gelato is melting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So let's close up here. It's just been speaking of gelato, a delicious evening. I mean, it's just, oh, thank you. Good for the soul. It's just been lovely. Thank you for all making it possible. For our hosts, Jane, Faith Matters, the England family for being here. They were already spending a bit of time at Sunstone, so thanks for doing double duty. Just everything. Bob, thank you so much. Let's see. Well, as was mentioned, I never knew Gene personally, so we kind of heard that. But through you, many of you represent that connection, and Bob particularly has been a valuable connection to Gene for me. And few, if any, that I know of have worked as hard as Bob to carry that legacy forward, to make Eugene's voice continue into the future in different ways. And that is hugely appreciated and huge gift. So let me just say, and for that introduction to a commercial, that Judge Thomas Griffith and I are in the process of editing 10 of Jane's best essays, each introduced by a leading Latter-day Saint scholar, Fiona Givens and Patrick Mason, Richard Bushman, Clifton Jolly, and other people. I think it'll be delighted for a new generation to learn about Gene through his essays, which have been so transformative. That's great. Thank you. That'll be published by Cofer Books. So again, as you just saw, once again, he's building another book forward of Gene. He's like,
it just seems appropriate to me that on this August anniversary, because your father passed away, right? In August, which I did not realize, that just happened to coincide with this month. That we not only honor Gene's remarkable influence on the world, but we also celebrate one who loved him and has worked so hard to breathe out his legacy in word and deed. So Bob burst into my life via Allison Pond some 16 years ago. At Lisa Cannon's, what was called the barn down in the avenues, a little gathering to promote the Liahona Children's Foundation, and Bob wanted to promote that a little bit. Now called the Bountiful because the church put the kibosh on Liahona, so we had to change it to Bountiful. Anyway,
Please get a flyer tonight.
so anyway, I had offered to do pro bono work for that, and we became fast friends from that. And he's been a great mentor to me. And like Gene, he has encouraged me and so many others to think and write and be curious and speak up and do things. So, and I continue. So this October, Gene will be 92. Sorry, Gene, Bob. Sorry, getting these two conflated. Bob will be 90 November. Okay. So the family birthday party is in October then.
Right.
Okay. Anyway,
Who did teach?
Bob couldn't seem to, when I kind of reached out trying to see if he could come in his birthday month, he couldn't. But so tonight, we're gonna continue this wonderful spirit and we're gonna celebrate early Bob's 90th birthday. You'll be in the same league as Charlotte. Well, no, Charlotte, you're gonna be 91 this year.
She 92.
I swear we just had your 90th birthday. That big.
No, that's a way. That's not pressure.
Oh,
Next year.
until next year.
What a lovely surprise.
So anyway, yeah. there you go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to your mom. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you so much. My son sent out an invitation to make me say, Bob Reese is old. And then he said, Bob Reese is really old.
Really old. So I'm really appreciative to Aubrey Chavez, who is a professional cake maker, and that gorgeous cake you see back there is Bob's birthday cake.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So thank you, Aubrey, for doing that. She volunteered. I actually thought about asking you about no, and then she did that out of the blue, volunteered. And then Mark, thank you for the gelatos. So
Susan says.
yes,
Once we're finished, I'm going to, we'll get a, direction about chairs. If you wanna just kind of push them off into that direction, we'll serve the birthday cake from here, and there's water and limeade, cookies and cherries. And somebody brought tomatoes that are just gorgeous. Or if you take them home, I'll slice them out. And then the gelatos in.
great, thank you.
And one more thing.
Yes.
In our family, when we sing happy birthday, there are 3 more verses. We won't sing them, but the next one is, how old are you? The third one is, you have to respond, I'm 90 years old. But then the last one, I think it all said, and that is, may God bless you.
That's lovely. I like that. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, James is gonna get his guitar.
No.
Nope.
Or your daughters, or? Do we, does it go?
Just everybody.
Same tune.
Same tune.
All right. God,
May God bless you. May God bless you. May God bless you. Bless you.
What greater blessing than to have friends, brothers and sisters who share something so precious as love and joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now Gloria has a few things to say before we.
Say something about Bob.
Big step right.
She's been very good at keeping it. Everybody was good at keeping it surprised. A lot of people knew that you said.
Oh, okay. You know, I became friends with Mary Bradford, and Mary Bradford had so much to say about Jean. And another person she talked about a lot was Bob Rees. I did not meet him until years later. But one of the things Bob loves is the Book of Mormon, and he's told me Alma was a man of many words. And I think Bob is a man of numerous quotes. He's always quoting and has memorized poetry. And I'm just going to read quickly some of the things that I've collected and that I've also found that I felt about him. Patrick Mason, because Bob reaches out and says thank you so many times. And he lets people know when he really loves what they've done. Patrick Mason said, it means a lot to hear your praise coming from a person who has been on the right side of issues, peace and love, crying in the wilderness for so long. Paul Reed said he has spent his life devoted to Mormon studies and to standing up theologically, intellectually, morally for the marginalized in Latter-day Saint history and culture. Mark Thomas said he is generous, synaptic generativity emitter, and an ambassador for the truth. Bob says of himself, when he's talking to Elder Holland, this is the peripatetic gadfly again. Joanna Brooks says, thank you for your decades of leadership out front and quietly. And this is from Barry Lopez that he traveled with him to China.
American writer, great writer.
And in his book that he dedicated, turned over to Bob, he said, for Bob Rees, sterling companion, I would travel anywhere with you, and when I travel without you, I would hope to conduct myself as you have. My very best wishes there. That was in 88. Clifton Jolly said, you are the decentest human being I know, despite all I have put you through over your writing in the past. And Jackson Pollock said, oh, he didn't say this of Bob, but I
Wow.
artists and poets are the raw nerve ends of humanity. By themselves, they can do little to save humanity. Without them, there would be little worth saving. I haven't shown you, I have some pictures here too that I'll put these out on the table over there so you can see them. And then I've got Bob writing as a young man and writing as a scholar later on. And then I've got pictures of him with children. And some of these are the children of Bountiful. Some of them are the Sunday school class he and I team taught, the 9-year-olds. This girl standing on the chair, she's going to fall into our arms. And his own grandchildren here. And in this I said, Bob has said this is quoting him, injustice, especially around babies and children, triggers me. And then another time he said, let the work that I've done speak for me, because he hasn't been keeping a journal.
Like if a journal in the next life, I'll remember everything. A beautiful one.
This is what I wrote. Bob has negligible senescence, which means gradual deterioration with age. It's negligible. Much like the tortoise, I guess I found this somewhere in. Much like the tortoise, Joshua trees, and fungi. So my quote is, Bob is a fun guy. Much like the Joshua tree that looks like it came straight out of Dr. Seuss' book. And when you see these pictures up close, he's here in the, there's some horns on display, and I said, "No, stand over there, I'll take a picture." And here he is, just waking up with his hair standing up straight. And, back in a long tunnel, a good circular. And here he is with my youngest grandson right after we got married. And they were with these big peels in their mouths. And then this is one from David Wolfe that I felt applied to Bob, and I quoted it. Bob is one who plunges into the world to uncover its foundation. And he quote, that was quote, and he sees, or better feels, the shaping and guiding hand of divinity in all things. End quote. Oh, he said, this is still continuing, he sees God's constancy behind the pageant of the universe. That's David Wolper, who wrote The Healer of Shattered Hearts. And I wrote, this picture, let's see, did I have a picture on that one? Yes. This is a much more dignified picture that I took. And before we were married, we went to an art exhibit and somebody stopped us and they said, "You look like the people in that picture." And he said, "We've got to take your picture." It was a Japanese or a Chinese man. And he's pulling her up the hill, helping her get along.
Sweet.
And this is something I wrote to Bob in anticipation of life with him. I said, "I feel fulfilled and ready for the challenge, in awe and yet inspired by the intimacy of knowing and being known." And Clifton just said to me, he feels a lot of the same resonance of Bob that he felt with Jean. And I'm saying on this, thank you, Jay and Jane, for introducing us, for knowing to include us. And then this is what my life is like too. Watch out for wild things.
Should have listened.
When I saw that, I said, "Let me have a picture."
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Hey,
One of the things in this other room, there's some papers and pencils, and I'll put these out. If you want to write on the papers, I'm going to put this into a booklet. It'd be nice to have any comments or roasts that you might want to say.
I just want to say, you need to walk by that cake before you cut and
Yeah, it's gorgeous, isn't it? It is beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful cake.
Mark, I like to say that.
Joan Smith, I'm Todd's mom, and I go off chats. I don't anyway. Chatter.
that was the daughter and granddaughter of Jim and Judy.
Tell me what my.
Yeah. Well, it's been involved in all stuff. I come out early on time. Yeah. It's not a profession, actually, has to daughter to have multiple scholarships. But
Well, it's in there.
Sorry, spit on bars.